he's not the only one. The global sleep economy is estimated to be worth more than $90 billion.
Well, yeah, everyone sleeps. You kind of can't get a bigger market than that.
Sure, and we're even spending money on sleep when we are not at home, because who wouldn't want to have the deepest, most magical sleep when they're traveling? Laura L. is a consultant for the United Nations World Tourism Organization, so she pays close attention to travel trends.
I was in South Korea at this high-end hotel. I actually got a whole menu of pillows. I could choose from one of 7 different pillows, and then all the duvets. And before you get there, you can choose your mattress type.
So hotels are trying to get in on this. They want a piece of the action.
Oh, yeah, they're cashing in. They actually call it sleep tourism. And Laura says it's really taking off. She's seen hotels with white noise machines like built right into the walls of the rooms. And then they're doing more relaxing activities like meditation and forest bathing.
I'm sorry, forest bathing? Like, isn't that just like walking in, like going on a hike?
I think so, except it's not free. The Fairmont charges $350 plus tax to forest bathe with them.
You'd forest bathe with me for $175. Just saying.
Laura says this kind of thing is happening at hotels everywhere.
Years ago, it would be maybe the granola crunchy kind of hippie yoga retreat places. But now people are really appreciating the importance of taking care of themselves. They're just go, go, go. And they need, to just let go and feel like themselves again.
I got to tell you about this survey that Hilton Hotels just did. They talked to 13,000 people about what they like to do when they're on vacation. Apparently, travelers love herkle-dirkling.
What we talked about you making up words. Stop doing it.
I didn't make it up. It's real. It's a Scottish word. Herkle-dirkling is when you lie in bed all morning. You're awake, but you just don't get up.
I think
where workers are operating heavy-duty equipment or working on production lines, and also transportation. He works with a lot of commercial truck drivers. But I also spoke to another sleep clinic that works with lawyers and professional athletes.
So, if you're thinking about a pro athlete or a lawyer, those are some pretty high-end earners. You could see why a company would spend the money to take care of them.
Sure, but Greg says this is definitely becoming more widespread. A lot of employers do offer fatigue assessments and extended benefits for sleep disorders. So you might be covered for medication or a CPAP machine. And sometimes all it takes is, a phone call to HR to find out. Also, there's a lot of organizations out there with free tips on how to get a better night's sleep. Even Tyler Rankin, who spent all that money on sleep gadgets, says in the end, the stuff that really worked for him didn't cost anything.
Your bedroom at nighttime should be kind of like a bat cave. Like 18 degrees is the perfect temperature. pitch dark. You don't go on your phone. You're not scrolling through TikTok or Instagram. Once you get to your bed, your brain needs to know it's time to fall asleep. And the more that you practice that, the better your brain will get at that cue to fall asleep. But if you're not doing those things, then there's no point in jumping into a $300 weighted blanket.
I love that he figured this out, right? Like sleep hygiene, and he figured out just how to get himself to sleep.
Yeah, but he still is a big fan of lying down on that bed of nails.
I've told so many people about this thing that I should start getting a royalty for it, to be honest.
I mean, I bought one.
No, come on, you didn't.
I did.
And?
Well, I've tried it a couple times, and I won't lie. It hurts like a...
Danielle! That's the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Blair Sanderson, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Habersrud. Thanks for listening.
To get back homeward, once there was a way to get back home. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby.
You're listening to CBC Radio 1. CBC, always here for Canada.
Here's to the bowl. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it. We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 12 noon, it's mainly sunny and 2 degrees. A mix of sun and cloud today and a high of 3. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is holding a rally to end racism in healthcare. They've gathered at the Odina Circle at the Forks and will walk to the Manitoba Legislative Building. The CBC's Mike Arsenault has more.
Close to 50 First Nations leaders and supporters gathered in the Odina Circle at the Forks with a message to end discrimination in the Manitoba healthcare system. An elder started the rally with a prayer, then the crowd marched through downtown and are making their way to the Legislative Building. Once they arrive, people in attendance will hear from Justin Flett, who has experienced healthcare discrimination firsthand. The group says Flett is just one example of a common issue in the healthcare system. First Nations and grassroots leaders, including Grand Chief Kyra Wilson, will also speak about the challenges First Nations people face when accessing healthcare. The group wants to highlight the need for equitable and culturally safe healthcare for all First Nations in Manitoba. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Arson will be the hot topic tonight at a meeting of historians and activists in the North End. Organizer Michael Redhead Champagne says it seems like fires are constant and now major streets are being targeted like Main and Selkirk. Champagne says on top of safety concerns, businesses are being wiped out and the community is losing services. He says it's time to collaborate with all of the local organizations to tackle the arson problem.
What do they see as the reasons behind some of these fires? What do they see as some of the possible sources of these consistent fires? And if we can identify some of those sources, that's obviously where we want to then focus our energy in trying to prevent these things from happening too.
Redhead says his group wants to attract young people to teach them the historical value of the neighborhood. Tonight's meeting is at 6 p.m. at Merchants Corner. Breaking news this hour, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey says he is stepping down after nearly 5 years in power. The orthopedic surgeon says he has always maintained he is not a career politician. As the Trump administration looks to shift American foreign policy priorities away from Europe, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is announcing a major increase in defense spending. Crystal Gomansing reports.
This government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
The move to ensure UK security, says Keir Starmer, means spending £13.4 billion, or just over $24 billion Canadian, on defense every year starting in 2027, meeting a renewed U.S. demand for NATO countries to spend more to ensure their own security.
For peace to endure in Ukraine and beyond, we need deterrence.
To increase defense spending, the Labour government is cutting development aid, a move Save the Children UK's office called a betrayal that makes the world a more dangerous place for children. Starmer acknowledged extreme, difficult and painful choices having to be made to prioritize security. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
A 43-year-old man and 21-year-old woman have been arrested and charged in Winnipeg after a report of a gun in a downtown high-rise. On Sunday evening, around 8:45, police were called to an apartment block in the 300 block of Kennedy Street. Building security had called because of a report of a man with a firearm. The tactical support team and other officers found a man and a woman in one of the suites. They were arrested without incident. An airsoft pistol was seized by officers. The two face a number of charges, including possession of a weapon and failure to comply with a probation order. Google Maps is in the spotlight for changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, but now some Canadians are noticing something funny about how Google Maps labels parks in this country. Liam Britton has more on the state of provincial parks.
So I thought, well, how can this possibly be true?
That's what Kiki Grabowski thought when she read a post on social media saying that Google Maps had started labeling provincial parks, like Elk Falls near her Campbell River, BC home, as state parks.
Well, that's our sovereignty. That's our country. Those parks belong to Canada. They are not state parks.
On Google's help forum and social media, thousands of users noted the errors affecting parks across the country. But Google told CBC, quote, "The vast majority of these parks have had their existing labels for several years. We're actively working to update labels for parks in Canada to avoid confusion." The concerns come at a time of tension between Canada and the U.S. As Monday turned to Tuesday, a number of formerly incorrect state parks had been reclassified as provincial parks or just plain old parks. Perhaps a sign of Google charting a new course. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And speaking of parks, the Assiniboine Park Conservancy is looking for volunteers to help out at the park this summer. It's put out a call for people 14 years and older to be part of the visitor experience at the zoo. The Leaf in the Park is a volunteer. The deadline to apply is June the 16th. And that's the news from Winnipeg and the forecast for today in Winnipeg. The clouds will come and go today. It'll be a bit brighter today than yesterday. We're looking at a high of 3. For tonight, increasing cloud and a low of -4. Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud today, a high of 3. Dauphin, mix of sun and cloud, also a high of 3. In Flin Flon today, periods of light snow, a high of -1. Thompson today, light snow up to 2 centimeters and a high of -9. And Churchill today, sunny with a high of -25 and a wind chill of -40. You're listening to CBC.
Well, good afternoon, Manitoba. It is lovely to be back with you. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, on the CBC Listen app, and also on CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Here's what's coming up on the show today. During our call-in segment after 12:30, how big a risk is avian flu to Manitobans? Canada just ordered 500,000 vaccines to protect humans against it. How worried are you about the virus? We're going to take your calls after 12:30. Also, Manitoba's Squeal on Pigs program continues to increase the number of wild pigs captured. More at 12:15. But first up here, after a month-long pause, U.S. President Donald Trump says he will hit Canadian goods with a 25% tariff. Reaction coming up. Manitoba depends on its imports and exports. Imports like engines, agrochemicals, and trailer components, and exports from wheat to buses. Thousands of jobs are involved. So the effect of 25% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration could be swift and widespread. An analysis released by Desjardins Economics today projects how some provinces will fare under the tariffs. It says central provinces, including Manitoba, are forecast to take some of the steepest hits. That's based on how deeply tied those provinces' economies are to U.S. exports. Terry Shaw is the regional vice president for the Prairies with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. I spoke with Terry earlier today.
Good day. Good day.
First off, I want to start off by asking you to your reaction. What's your reaction to Trump's announcement yesterday that that brief pause that we had on the 25% tariff is now going to be coming to Canadian goods?
Yeah, well, it's coming to American customers, importers of Canadian goods. We can't, reconfirm that enough. These are prices that Americans are going to pay on goods they bring in from Canada, but it's not good. It's not good for a whole host of reasons, one of which the vast majority of what we ship to the United States are intermediary inputs, things they use as part of their manufacturing process, things they build and ship elsewhere, including back to Canada. And if there are U.S. tariffs, our Canadian government has committed to counter tariffs, which would mean the goods that we're bringing back in for purchase and use in Canada as made in the United States will be tariffed as well.
Now, we did have a brief pause from this because we were looking at possibly these tariffs happening a month ago. But what have you been hearing from manufacturers during this pause about everything that's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the uncertainty is really damaging. It's incredibly stressful. And any kind of policy uncertainty, any kind of economic uncertainty is just cause for people to sit on their hands and discontinue investment plans or planned or otherwise. We did a national survey of our members a few weeks ago now, nationally from BC through to Newfoundland, including our members here in Manitoba, in advance of the tariffs. Many of them, if they had the production capacity or the cash flow, were trying to expedite shipments into the United States in advance of the tariffs. Over 1 in 5, 22% already froze hiring. And we've heard since the time of this survey, based on conversations with customers and other chilling effects already seen in the market, some have begun layoffs, unfortunately, of some of their workforce. 30% have delayed investment, and over 1 in 5, 28% are seeking alternate markets. What the survey also told us was if the tariffs are actually implemented, half of them will have to freeze hiring or lay off workers. Half of them will seek to move some production to the United States, which is incredibly unfortunate. And just under half, 46%, will postpone planned investments. And so incredibly damaging to the manufacturing community here in Canada.
So it sounds like companies have been bracing for this, have been preparing for this. Yeah,
oh, for sure. Yeah. It's hard to prepare without having specifics. And even though the specifics have been announced by President Trump is notorious for changing the specifics at the last moment. And so, based on the fact we're 7 days out, I think there's a higher confidence level that these tariffs will actually be implemented as discussed next week. But until then, manufacturers have absolutely been taking steps to try and protect their business, and includes some of the things I've mentioned. It also includes conversations. I think a real key to this will be ongoing diplomacy and conversation. So our manufacturers have been having conversations with their suppliers in the United States, their customers in the United States. Hey, what is this going to mean to our contractual pricing? What is this going to mean to our long-term relationship? What's my ability to forecast my production need based on what you expect you'll continue to be able to buy, at what price point we'll be able to negotiate. So a lot of that work has been ongoing and continues to be ongoing.
Terry, which industries, maybe you can remind our listeners, which industries will be the most impacted by this?
Well, it'll be manufacturers in general. Again, if there's a 25% blanket tariff, anybody that takes a handful of materials, changes them, manufactures them into a finished good, and ships it across the border, they will be negatively impacted. That said, again, I cannot remind people enough that Canada and the United States, we build things together. We have for many, many decades. It's been a great element of our collective economic success. Over 60% of what Canadians ship to the United States are intermediary inputs. Over half of what Canada brings in from the United States are intermediary inputs. We are not exactly competitive economies. We collaborate. We build things together. It's a system that's worked and served both of our economies for many, many decades.
Will Manitoba, do you think, be able to brace itself for the economic impact that this could have?
Absolutely. Yeah, we got through COVID. We got through Trump 1.0. It won't be great. And there will be some who feel the impacts maybe more than others, which is unfortunate. But yeah, this will start with the manufacturing community, very quickly lead into those who work alongside the manufacturing community in helping us export our goods, those in the supply chain, trucking, rail, and other supply chain partners. From there, if investments are being slowed or stalled, what does that mean for the industrial construction industry or those who support our expansions? If there's less economic activity going on in general, if people are losing their jobs and have less disposable income, what does that mean to the retail sector, the restaurant sector, the art sector, the charitable sector? So I hope this won't be felt too loudly or too broadly, but the potential for widespread economic impact is certainly a reality.
After this announcement from President Trump yesterday, has there been any talk or has there been any kind of discussion amongst manufacturers that you've heard of maybe, because this is going to ramp up talks again to buy Canadian, to support Canadian businesses. Has there been more talk about that, or even possibly looking at other countries or other regions to possibly do business with?
Yeah, one of the items that when we surveyed our members, when they said in advance of the tariffs, what are some mitigating steps you're taking? And 28% of them said they are seeking alternate markets already. And while, market diversification is always a good thing, the reality is the United States economy is huge and is very close to us. I could leave Winnipeg and 90 minutes later be in the United States. I can't say the same about Europe, Asia, or other markets. Doesn't mean they're not viable markets. It's just different. And changing your customer base, your supply chain, your production schedules to meet those extended supply chain timelines is not kind of something that's simple or quick. It takes a longer term strategy and will take some supports. And so we have asked our government partners, both for long-term and short-term supports. Short-term supports, how do we keep that production from leaking into the United States? How do we keep people employed here in Manitoba and Canada? How do we mitigate some of those tariff cost impacts so that our members can continue to manufacture and sell into the United States long term?
Terry, I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today here on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
That is Terry Shaw, the Regional Vice President for the Prairies with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. You can hear more of our interview with Terry on CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. It is 12:16 and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio as well as on the CBC Listen app and CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Still ahead here, a program introduced just over 3 years ago to control Manitoba's wild pig population continues to capture more and more of the pest animal. We're going to get an update on squeal on pigs coming up. Also in the second half hour, we're going to take your calls. Canada just purchased 500,000 doses of avian influenza human vaccines. We're going to talk to an epidemiologist who's going to be here to take your questions about the avian flu coming up. Well, let's take a look at the forecast today here in Winnipeg. We're looking at a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 3 degrees. Wind south, 15 at times, gusting to 30. Tonight, increasing cloud and a low of -4. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy, slight chance of late day showers or flurries, and a high of 1 degree. Right now in Brandon, freezing fog and -5. For you in Churchill, mainly sunny and -28 degrees, 0 in Dauphin, under a mostly cloudy sky. Right now in Thompson at this hour, light snow and -10. And in Winnipeg at the airport, it is mostly cloudy and 2 degrees. Riley Lachuk will join us after the 12:30 news for more on your forecast. Wild pigs are known to be aggressive animals that can cause damage to crops and spread disease. There's been a problem in this province controlling the wild pig population, but since the Squeal on Pigs program was introduced in 2021, the number of wild pigs caught continues to grow. Wayne Lees is the program's coordinator and joins me now. Good afternoon, Wayne. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Give us an update. What kinds of numbers is Squeal on Pigs seeing here in terms of the number of pigs captured?
So our numbers have been going up every year. In 2022, we had 122 pigs that we've captured and removed, and that's been rising steadily until last year we had over 200 pigs captured and removed.
So how much have these numbers impacted the overall population here in Manitoba?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's difficult to get an accurate population estimate. But one thing we do know is that we don't have nearly the same problem in Manitoba as they have, say, in the U.S. Our wild pigs are very, very different, and the problem is very, very different. So our estimate at a population in the province is probably in the high hundreds to low thousands, which is a far cry from what they experience south of the border.
So what makes the wild pigs here in Canada different than in the U.S.?
Well, we've been learning a lot about how they grow, how they reproduce. And this is all based on our field experience and our data analysis. These pigs tend to grow quite slowly. They don't reach sexual maturity nearly as quickly as, say, a commercial pig would. And their litter size is about half of what a commercial pig would produce. So what we're finding then is that depending on when the young are born, if they're born at the beginning of winter, the chances of having them survive to the next spring are pretty low, actually. Winter is one of our saving graces when it comes to controlling the wild pig population in this province.
So, Wayne, as you mentioned, the number of pigs captured continues to grow more and more every year. What do you think has contributed to why you're seeing higher numbers of pigs captured over the years?
I think we're being more effective. When we first started the program, we didn't have the background knowledge about where the pigs were located, where the so-called hot spots were. And as we've enlisted support from the public and they've reported sightings, we've been able to locate the pigs that are actually reproducing. And it seems like our hotspot is in the Spruce Woods area. So that's really where we're focusing our efforts right now to try and reduce that population pretty significantly.
So why is it that area specifically, the Spruce Woods area, seems to be a problem?
Well, I think it relates probably to the habitat. These wild pigs like an area where the parkland kind of comes up next to agricultural land, because the agricultural land provides a food source, the parkland The bush areas provide shelter. So that seems to be where they like to hang out. And so our efforts in that area are actually starting to pay some dividends now, I think.
I remember when this program first started in 2021, there was a tip line where people could call and report wild pigs. How many calls are you receiving from people?
Well, in 2024, we had 140 sightings reported. So that's either people from the public who are phoning in or going onto our website and letting us know, or interacting with landowners. We talk to over 150 landowners every month. So our field staff are very active around the province to try to locate where these pigs are found.
Now, at the beginning here, I just touched on some of the problems that these wild pigs can cause. But I mean, what kind of impact would happen if these animals weren't controlled here in Manitoba?
Well, they're an invasive species, so they do a lot of damage to the environment. They'll really destroy native pasture. They'll eat the feeds that other animals rely on, such as acorns and those types of things. We find that when wild pigs move into an area, the deer tend to move out. So they really do influence the local native populations. One of the big issues is, though, that they can carry foreign animal diseases. So if a disease like foot and mouth disease or African swine fever was to ever be introduced into Canada, wild pigs could act as a vector to spread that disease.
Which is why it's important to get in front of this now, right?
Exactly. I think we have an opportunity right now to expend some serious efforts. I think we can eliminate this pest from Manitoba. It will take perseverance, but I think it's certainly doable.
Is this program unique to Manitoba?
Well, each province has its own wild pig control effort. The thing that makes Manitoba's program a little bit different, though, is that it's not run by government. We are supported through provincial and federal dollars through the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Program, and Manitoba Pork supports with administrative support and helping to run the project. But we really engage the landowners, and they're really our partners in this. So if landowners get in touch with us and let us know that they have wild pigs, we'll work with them to establish a trap on their property and remove the pigs for them.
So, Wayne, what's next? It sounds like the program has been successful so far. What's coming up next?
Well, we're really trying to use some applied science. So we've been working with the Assiniboine College and BDX Laboratories in Winnipeg to work on an environmental DNA test so that we can sample water and determine if wild pigs are in that area. So that's pretty cutting edge stuff. That's the first time really in Canada that we've been able to get a test and get it field ready. We work with our field technicians who are equipped with thermal imaging drones so that we can find these pigs when they're in heavy cropland or under trees. And we're always looking for new ways to improve our trapping techniques. We're pretty successful. When we get a group of pigs in sight, we can usually trap the whole group.
Wayne Lees, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.
Wayne Lees is the program coordinator of Squeal on Pigs, Manitoba. It is 12:26 now, and Swift Current's Coulter Wall was supposed to be performing in Winnipeg last night. If you want to check out Coulter, since you can't check them out in person tonight, here's a tune for Coulter Wall. This one is Cowpoke.
I'm lonesome but happy, rich but I'm broke, and the good Lord knows the reason. I'm just a cowpoke from Cheyenne to Douglas, the ranges I know, 'cause I drift with the wind, no one cares where I go. I ain't got a dime in these old worn out jeans, so I'll stop eating steak and I'll go back to beans. I'll pick up a 10 spot in Prescott, I know, riding the Bronx in the big rodeo. Some evening in the springtime, a filly all fine, I might spend all summer with her on my mind. I'll never be branded, I'll never be broke. I'm a carefree range riding, drifting cowpoke.
That is Coulter Wall with Cowpoke. Coming up here on Radio Noon, how big a risk is avian flu to Manitobans? Canada just ordered 500,000 vaccines to protect humans against it, and now the first case of H5N1 has been detected in the province. How worried are you about the virus? An epidemiologist will join us after 12:30 to take your questions. You can call us 204-780-0893 or text us at 204-588-7355. Stay with us. Your local CBC News is coming up next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 12:30. Mainly sunny and 3. We're looking at a mix of sun and cloud today and a high of 3. Marchers are making their way from the Odina Circle at the Forks to the Manitoba Legislative Building. They're calling for an end to discrimination in Manitoba's healthcare system. More than 50 First Nations leaders and supporters are taking part in the rally and march. They're hearing from Justin Flett, who experienced healthcare discrimination firsthand. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs organized the march. Historians and community activists are in the North End when they will be brainstorming tonight about ways to tackle arson. Michael Redhead Champagne is with the North End History. He says many people are worried about their safety.
It just feels constant, and it's happening on our bigger streets as well. So Selkirk Avenue, Main Street. When we see these things happening, it really impacts the whole neighborhood, not only because there's a missing building and there has been arson, but because folks maybe have been hurt in that situation and building owners are now reeling.
Redhead says his group wants to attract young people to teach them the historical value of the neighborhood. He says many organizations are already doing good work addressing arson. Redhead wants to bring them together to share resources and ideas. Tonight's meeting is at 6 p.m. at Merchants Corner. We have breaking news from Newfoundland and Labrador.
It is with a heart full of pride and hard-earned confidence in the future of Newfoundland and Labrador that I must now move on.
Andy Furey has announced he is quitting as the province's leader. Furey says he could not commit to another 4-year term as premier, and he intends to return to practicing medicine. He says he has asked the party to begin the process of selecting a new leader, and a general election would be held within a year after that. Furey was elected in August of 2020, and one of his signature achievements was reaching an agreement to negotiate a new deal with Quebec on the Churchill Falls hydro project. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is announcing plans to dramatically increase that country's defence spending.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
Starmer says the increase will mean, on average, an additional £13 billion added to the defence budget every year for the next 10 years. In total, that's a commitment of $170 billion US. He says the goal is to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2035. And the Assiniboine Park Conservancy is looking for volunteers to help out at the park this summer. It's put out a call for people aged 14 and older to be part of the visitor experience at the zoo, the Leaf, and the park. For youth aged 14 to 18, they're looking for members of the camp crew and teenage engagement ambassadors, and a number of positions are also available for adults as well. The deadline to apply is June 16th. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Good day to get out, Megan, and check out the zoo because the weather is cooperating.
No kidding, but wear your rubber boots.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Megan.
Take care.
That is Megan Ketchison from our CBC Local News Center. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. It is lovely to be back with you. Coming up here in the second half hour, or coming up here shortly, right after the weather, Canada just purchased 500,000 doses of avian influenza human vaccines. And the first case of avian flu has been detected here in Manitoba. Now, how worried are you about avian flu? Who should be getting the shot? An epidemiologist will join us here to take your questions. You can call us. Here's the number, 204-780-0893. Again, 204-780-0893. You can also text us your questions and comments, 204-588-7355, 204-788-7355. 7355. Well, let's turn our attention now to the forecast. Riley Alechuk joins me now in studio. Hi, Riley.
Before we get into the weather, I just wanted to say how unbelievably happy I am that you're back. I have missed you so much over the last year.
I've missed you too, Riley. I've missed you too. Now,
and I know our listeners have too.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad to be back. And I'm glad to be back too. And I mentioned this to you as the weather is warming up because you had to deliver last week for the last couple weeks. Lots of very cold forecasts.
Yes.
You did mention here that you kind of you're seeing something on the horizon, and then you're going to fill us in on that.
Yes. I mean, anywhere in southern Manitoba, I would say stock up on as much washer fluid as you can. You're going to need it for the next few days. It's very, very sloppy again today, and rinse and repeat the next couple of days across really the southern half of the province. Different story the further north you go. What we're seeing is basically a parade of systems, one after another, impacting parts of northern Manitoba with some accumulating snow through the rest of the week. So we'll get into that. Looking at current temperatures, you can really see where the jet stream just kind of cuts through northern Manitoba right now. The Paw at -3, Lynn Lake sitting at -12 right now, Thompson's at -10. A little bit further south into Barons River at -1 right now. So you can see that divide between the warmer air and the colder air, sitting at +2 in Winnipeg right now. Still a little hanging below zero in Brandon at the moment at -5, but Portage sitting at +3. Mix of sun and clouds. I know we're in a bit of a sunnier spot here in the Red River Valley right now, but some clouds to the west and to the north right now. So expect a mix of sun and clouds really throughout the afternoon here across southern Manitoba with a little bit of snow impacting parts of the north. That's system number 1. As we get into Wednesday, cloud starts to build in the Red River Valley. I think a slight chance of flurries into the morning hours tomorrow. Then comes system number 2 through northern Manitoba. This one, I think, brings us a better chance of some flurries to the afternoon here in Winnipeg. But again staying further north, riding along that jet stream. So places like the Pa, Flin Flon into Norway House seeing the brunt of this. That quickly moves out into Thursday, back to a mix of sun and clouds, and into the afternoon hours into Friday. Then comes system number 3. That one, I think, has an even better chance of having a little bit of snow here into the Red River Valley late week. So we'll look at that. Up to 6 a.m. Thursday, looking at 4 to 5 centimeters of snow in a line from, say, Grand Rapids, Norway House into Thompson. I think even maybe a couple centimeters possible. But advancing into Friday, looking at totals in that 10 to 15 centimeter range for places like Flin Flon, Norway House into Barons River, Grand Rapids, even looking at about 10 centimeters. Trace to maybe a couple of centimeters the further south you go, certainly far, far less in terms of snowfall accumulation. So today in Winnipeg, looking at a high of 3 degrees. Temperatures really sitting around the freezing mark really across most of the province. Churchill being the exception, looking at a high of minus 26 this afternoon. 1 degree tomorrow, -1 for Thursday. Temperature falls to -6 by the time we get to the afternoon Friday. -7 for Saturday, and back up to freezing by the time we get to early next week again.
So we're kind of seeing a mix of everything. You know,
A little bit.
The tough part about this time of the year when things are thawing out and freezing again is, what do you wear? What kind of footwear do you wear? What kind of coat do you wear?
I wore a sweater to work today.
No jacket.
No jacket.
Okay. Yeah.
I was tired of the jacket after weeks of the winter coat, and I live 5 minutes away, so
I don't blame you. Thank you very much,
You're
Riley.
welcome.
That is Riley Lachuk with a look at your forecast. And of course, you can see more of Riley's forecast coming up on CBC Winnipeg News at 6. It is 12:38, and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app, and on CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. Well, the first case of avian flu, or H5N1, was detected in Manitoba. Canada's public health agency just purchased 500,000 doses of vaccines to protect humans from the virus. Canada, as you may recall, reported its first domestically acquired human case of the H5N1 virus in November last year. Health officials say there is no reported case of human-to-human transmission. But south of the border, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, nearly 70 people have contracted bird flu since last April, and the virus has been found in dairy cattle there. So, how worried are you about avian flu here in Manitoba? To answer your questions and concerns about the avian flu, Dr. Christopher Labos joins me now. He is an epidemiologist and cardiologist. And again, you can call us with your questions at 204-780-0893. Again, 204-780-0893. You can also text us at 204-588-7355. 204-588-7355. Dr. Labos, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
No, thank you for having me.
I want to start off by asking you, how much of a threat is the avian flu here to the average Canadian?
Look, to most people walking around, they are probably not going to get avian influenza. They probably are going to get influenza because we're sort of right smack in the middle of our flu peak right now here in Canada. So influenza is a concern. The avian influenza that we've been talking about because of everything that's been happening in the US and here, probably not a very high risk to most humans unless they happen to work in sort of high risk professions where they're in direct contact with bird populations. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get this right now. I think the worry and the reason why we're talking about this so much is that there is a very real concern that this particular strain of avian influenza could mutate, get better at infecting humans, and then become a much, much broader global problem at some point in the future. We just don't know when that point is going to be, if ever.
Now, Canada purchased 500,000 doses of the vaccine. Who exactly will be getting this?
So that remains to be determined. It's unclear if we're going to have a very broad rollout or whether we're just going to have a very limited rollout. What other countries have done is they've primarily vaccinated the people who are at highest risk, people who work on poultry farms, people who deal with birds, people who deal with animals. Because right now, the vast majority of the cases that we've seen have been animal to human transmission. And we have had avian influenza outbreaks before across the world. This is not a new virus. It's relatively new, but we have seen it before. When those outbreaks have happened, they have typically been in this type of situation, animal to human. We haven't really seen human to human spread in any type of sustained fashion. And so a broad-based vaccination campaign probably would not be necessary right now. You would really want to target the people who are most likely to get sick, i.e. the people who work with the potentially infected animals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how, I mean, because not only can this, when you think of avian flu, a lot of people would think, this is chickens, this is turkeys, but this can affect, a wider bird population, right?
Right. And the way it spreads is the migratory patterns of wild birds. That's why this is so difficult to contain, because wild birds don't respect international borders, right? They fly around. Now, what tends to happen is that the wild birds will then infect the domestic bird population, and in particular chickens, because how do we raise chickens? We keep them together, clustered together in a high density on a farm, because that's how we raise them. And so this is particularly damaging to the bird population. The other dimension to this is that right now, what happened in the US over the past few months was that dairy cattle started to become infected. So the fact that we call it avian influenza, that's sort of like a shorthand moniker for us. That doesn't mean it only infects birds. The fact that it has been able to infect quite a large number of dairy cows would suggest that it's getting better at infecting multiple different species, especially mammalian species, which is why people are thinking, oh, is this virus slowly becoming more adapted to a potential human population? Could it start infecting humans much more easily than it has done in the past?
So, I mean, how concerned should people be? Because, and you just brought it up there, because of the fact that it's spread now to dairy cattle. And then the next thing, it could spread to another animal. It could spread to humans. So, I mean, what is there a lot of, how concerned should people be about that?
So it depends what you mean by concerned. We should be concerned about this. We should talk about it. We should monitor it. We should study it. We should collect data on it, because this virus does have the potential to spread much more widely than it currently has. So you have to keep that thought in your head, while at the same time keeping a seemingly contradictory thought in your head, which is, if you're walking around, downtown Winnipeg, are you probably going to get avian influenza? No, unless you happen to see a dead bird on the side of the street and don't have the good sense to call animal control and start poking at it yourself. So the risk to you as an individual is low, but the risk to a population is not negligible. And I think part of the problem is that because of COVID, a lot of people have to some degree checked out, and they'll say, unless this is going to kill 2 million people, don't bother me with this. That's sort of the wrong approach. We have to be mindful, and we have to monitor these situations, because we don't know what disease is going to burn itself out and what disease is going to sort of explode and what disease is just going to continue in a moderate fashion. So we need to be aware of it. We need to worry about it in the sense of being mindful of it, but we don't need to panic about it, because, again, the risk to the average person is actually quite low.
We are talking to Dr. Christopher Labos, an epidemiologist and cardiologist. We're taking your questions about your concerns around the avian flu. Here are the numbers to call and text us at 204-780-0893. You can call us at that number. You can also text us your questions at 204-588-7355. Dr. Labos, we know that a case has been detected here in Manitoba, but what do we know about the nature of the cases in Canada so far?
So so the one case that was in British Columbia, the young person who got sick was actually quite sick. And this has been, generally speaking, what we've seen with avian influenza in the past. Whenever there have been past outbreaks over the years, the cases have been, on average, quite severe. And I think that's why people are worried about this more so than with other things, because if the virus maintained its current level of severity and just spread more widely, then it could have a very serious impact on the human population. The caveat, and the thing that you have to be worried about, or not worried about, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is it possible that mild cases are going undiagnosed? Are there people with very mild cases of avian influenza that think they have regular influenza and don't go and see a doctor because their symptoms are not that bad? That is always the potential. So it does appear to be a more severe disease, but there's a big asterisk to that, is that, until you have a broad-based surveillance system in place, there's always the possibility that you're missing the more mild cases, which means that the disease may not be as severe as you initially think.
Dr. Labos, we have a call. Rob is on the line. Good afternoon, Rob. What is your question for Dr. Labos?
Hey, how's it going? I have two actual questions. First of all, I have idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Should I be concerned from that point of view? As far as the second question, basically, I hunt moose, deer, goose. Should that be a concern?
So any patient that has an underlying lung disease like IPF is certainly going to be at higher risk if they get infected. But right now, the risk of infection from avian influenza is quite low. I would be more concerned about regular influenza because, as I said sort of right at the beginning, this is when influenza is surging across Canada, and this is a pretty bad flu year relative to what we've endured over the past few years. So for you and for all patients, I would be more concerned about the circulating strains of influenza right now, which is largely H1N1 rather than H5N1, which is avian influenza. But should this become an issue in the future, we have a number of public health measures, the main one being vaccination. So should people with underlying conditions get vaccinated for influenza? Yes. If avian influenza becomes a problem, should they be vaccinated against that? Yes, because it will blunt the impact of the disease and probably decrease the likelihood of getting infected. Specifically with regard to hunting, that's probably not a high-risk activity because you're not really coming into close contact with many of the animals. You have to be a little bit careful when you're handling, if you're hunting birds, you have to be a little bit careful when you're handling them otherwise. But what tends to happen, the people who get sick tend to be people who work on farms, who are in close contact with the animals, that have to clean up their droppings, that are exposed to the bodily fluids of animals, and are often breathing in the same air that the animals are living in. So hunting outdoors, especially if you're doing stuff like deer and moose, which as of now have not, to my knowledge, had any reported cases of avian influenza, doesn't really seem like a major concern.
Rob, thank you so much for your call. Again, we are talking to Dr. Christopher Labos about your concerns around the avian flu. You can give us a call. The number to call is 204-780-0893, or you can text us your questions at 204-588-7355. Dr. Labos, one thing that I've heard is that a lot of people are concerned, can humans contract the flu from poultry products or eggs? You were hearing about how the number of eggs has been limited, and so wondering if people can get sick that way.
So we have to extrapolate a little bit from that, because if we go back to the US and the dairy cattle, the reason why that became a concerning issue is because there were traces of the virus found in milk. And there were a few cases, mainly of animals, a lot of barn cats, that got sick after drinking the raw milk of infected cattle. And so there was a concern about a contamination of the dairy supply in the US and of the dairy supply here in Canada, which is why we started to do testing. What was subsequently found was that when milk is pasteurized, meaning when you heat it to kill all the bacteria and stuff that is in there, it destroyed the virus. And so pasteurized milk, which is what you're going to get at the grocery store, is not going to pose an infection risk. Why this became a bit of a conversation point was because you have been seeing a growing movement of people liking to drink raw milk, which, first point, has no health advantages over pasteurized milk. Second point, actually much more dangerous, not just with avian influenza, but for all the other bacteria and viruses that can be in milk. So please, nobody drink raw milk. The fact that we pasteurize our milk means that we can be very confident about the safety of our food supply. And the fact that we cook our food should give us confidence in our food supply, because cooking our food, heating it, applying heat to it is going to kill any potential infectious organisms. Where you have to be a little bit careful is if you start dealing with raw products, which you shouldn't be doing. And of course, if you start handling things like raw chicken and raw eggs, yes, avian influenza is a concern, but a much larger concern is going to be things like salmonella, which unfortunately make a lot of people sick every year. So as long as you're practicing basic food safety, protocols in your kitchen and not mixing the raw stuff with the cooked stuff and contaminating other things with raw meat and eggs, you should be okay. So a small theoretical concern, but something that is easily overcome by just cooking your food properly.
How much of a problem is this in other countries, Dr. Labos? We hear about Canada, we hear about the United States, but where else are we seeing avian flu popping up?
We have seen it across multiple countries. Some of the Scandinavian countries actually started a vaccination campaign a few months ago, a fairly limited vaccination campaign, really looking at the high-risk workers, people working on poultry farms. So this is an issue, and we have seen outbreaks in the past in, East Asia and other parts of the country as well. So this is a virus that is always present in what we call animal reservoirs. So part of the reason why this is hard to control is because this virus is living in wild birds, is living in pigs, which are another major animal reservoir for influenza. And then every so often, you see these human outbreaks happen. And it's unclear why specifically they happen in specific places at specific times and not in other places at other times, but it is always there. It's going to be a very difficult virus to actually completely eradicate because it exists not just in humans, but in animals. So we are going to see this globally. We probably are going to see future outbreaks. The key to this is going to be having a pandemic preparedness plan in place so that we aren't, to a certain degree, making it up as we go along, which is one of the criticisms that was leveled against various levels of government at the beginning of COVID. What that was that there was no plan in place to roll out the vaccine and to deal with this. To be fair, COVID was a new virus. We know that avian influenza exists. We have a stockpile of vaccines if necessary. So this sort of thing is going to happen. We are going to see it in other countries too. We just have to be aware that it's possibly going to happen again, even if it burns out right now in North America. We just have to be ready to deal with it when it actually comes.
We're taking your calls here on Radio Noon. Concerns around avian flu. We're talking to Dr. Christopher Labos, an epidemiologist and cardiologist. You can call us at 204-780-0893 or 204-588-7355. Out of curiosity, Dr. Labos, how different is the avian flu than, say, the current flu that's circulating out there? Is there a difference in symptoms? Is one strain more dangerous than the other?
So that's a difficult question to answer, because first off, here's the thing. Some basic biology, which I know is what everybody expects when they tune into the lunchtime radio show. Influenza is not one thing. Influenza is not one disease. There are multiple different strains of influenza, which we sort of categorize into one giant bag. And the reason why you need to get a flu vaccine every year, and the reason why it's a different flu vaccine every year, is because there are different flu viruses circulating every year. So this year, the predominant strain is H1N1, but there's a few other minor ones circulating. Avian influenza is H5N1. What do these letters mean? Well, very basically, and this is as far as I'm going to go into the details, don't worry, you basically have two parts to influenza, an H part and an N part, and there are different versions of this. So if you have H1N1, it's called, well, it's what we used to call pig flu, although we tend not to use that name anymore. But, if you have H1N1, it's this virus. If you have H5N1, it's this virus. If you have H3N2, it's this virus. Are some more severe than others? Yes. A lot of when we talk about a good versus bad flu year, a lot of that is determined by how good a match the flu vaccine is to the circulating strains. When you have a good match of the flu vaccine, the impact of the flu season is largely blunted. It depends a little bit on the uptake of flu vaccine as well. When a lot of people get the flu vaccine, that also blunts the impact that it has on our healthcare system. So there's a lot of different factors that play into it. I think if you want a sort of a broad statement, avian influenza, H5N1, does tend to be, or it appears to be more severe because when it has infected humans, those humans have tended to get very, very sick. With one exception is that a lot of the cases in the US were not that severe. But that's also because even within the H5N1 rubric, you do have different types of subclasses of virus, if you want to think of it that way. And so the virus that infected the teen in BC was actually not the same strain that was infecting the dairy cows in the US. So it's very hard to say how bad is this, because this that we're talking about is not one thing. It's many different types of viruses. And we don't know which one is going to outcompete the others. We don't know which one is going to spread globally, if at all. And we don't even know which flu viruses are going to be dominant next flu season, even though we're not actually finished with this one yet. We sort of have to make best guesses by looking at what's circulating in the southern hemisphere during our summer, their winter, to make a prediction of what's going to circulate in the next winter flu season. And overall, we do a pretty good job, but it is an estimate. It is a forecast, and sometimes forecasts are wrong. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question. Like, is this worse? Mm-hmm. Yes, but there's a lot of other variables that could end up impacting the correctness of that answer.
Dr. Labos, we really do appreciate you joining us on the show today to take questions and to address some of those concerns. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. You take care.
You too. Dr. Christopher Labos is an epidemiologist and cardiologist. Well, we're coming up now to 12:58. Faith Fundal, host of Up to Speed, joins me now in studio. Hi, Faith.
Hey, Marge. On the show today and tomorrow, we're going to talk about potholes. Yes, it is that time of year. First up, just after the 3 o'clock world this hour, we'll hear from MPI about how it's managing all these potholes. And we're opening the phone lines tomorrow at 3 o'clock as we hear from the city of Winnipeg about how it's dealing with potholes and try to answer questions from folks. And we'll provide those phone numbers for people to call in tomorrow.
Ah, yes. It is that time of year, isn't it?
Be careful.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Faith.
Thank you.
Join Faith Fundal this afternoon on Up to Speed here starting at 3 o'clock. Well, thank you for tuning into Radio Noon today. Thank you to our wonderful, hardworking crew, our tech, May McKillop, director, Sierra Sanders, producer, Wendy Parker, and our YouTube live stream director, Travis Peterson. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Coming up next here on CBC Radio, Unreserved. Have a good one.